So, if night 3 had a theme, I would say it was protecting our freedoms and the illustration of true leadership, which was a running theme for all 3 nights. If it had a sub-theme, I would say it was holy hell, does the Democratic backbench have a lot of talent? Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey and a gifted orator, did the first half of the MC duties before turning the job over to Minnie Kaling for primetime. The theme of freedom was juxtaposed with the danger of the Republican plan to implement Project 2025. Project 2025 continued to make a comeback throughout the night with a coffee table-sized version that people kept bringing out. Vice presidential candidate Tim Walz later in the evening said the Republicans aren't bluffing with Project 2025. He said, take it from a high school football coach. If someone takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it. SNL's Kenan Thompson even did a bit on the Project 2025 plan with a bunch of everyday Americans whose lives would be deeply affected by the proposals. He spoke to an OBGYN, a married member of the LGBTQ community, someone who uses insulin daily, and someone who works for a public school board. And then he found the page in the book where what they do or who they are would no longer be acceptable or allowed in the next Republican presidency. It was a funny bit about a serious topic and a unique way to bring home the idea that today's Republicans are planning nothing short of a complete upheaval of our society. Dana Nessel, the Attorney General of Michigan, got a huge response to the idea of the plan abolishing the right to her marriage by holding up her left hand and showing her wedding ring and saying,
"You can pry this wedding band from my cold, dead, gay hand."
The importance of literal freedom was given a human face when the parents of a 23-year-old American boy, who is one of the remaining 109 hostages held in Gaza, came out for this gut-wrenching segment. These parents have been living every parent's worst nightmare for almost a year. And as the father John said, although this is a political convention, this is not a political issue. It's a humanitarian one. The parents said they have met with the president and vice president many times, and they gave firsthand testament to how hard the two of them have been working on behalf of the hostage families to bring people's loved ones home and to seek a ceasefire to bring peace to the Middle East. The father said there is a surplus of agony on all sides of this tragedy, and in a competition of pain, there are no winners. He said the Jewish tradition has a saying that every person is a universe, and he said we must work to save all the universes on both sides. There was a great video showing Kamala Harris as a senator, just grilling people in the Senate. It drove home the idea that at her heart, she is a prosecutor who has no time for criminals, whether they are drug dealers, child traffickers, or Republican politicians. There was a lot of talk about the border. We heard from a Texas congresswoman who reminded us that Congress had a bipartisan border deal negotiated by some of the most conservative people in Congress, and it was ready to be signed by the president. But Trump told his party to kill the bill because the crisis at the border was better for his campaigning. It was a scathing acknowledgement that Republican lawmakers are no longer trying to fix problems, but obstruct solutions that might make their opponent look good to the detriment of the American people. That cynical choice was highlighted by a Texas sheriff who sees the crisis at the border firsthand every day and was so disappointed when the bill law enforcement was expecting was suddenly abandoned. We clearly need leaders looking to solve problems, not score political points. We pivoted from immigration to the danger of Trump as a leader, illustrated so clearly by the horrors of January 6th. Olivia Troy, a former Trump administration official who worked with Mike Pence, did what was essentially a live whistleblower speech about how it was terrifying to work in the Trump administration. But what keeps her up at night is what will happen if he ever gets back into office, because everyone who could protect us from his worst instincts are now gone. She said she saw firsthand how Trump laid the groundwork to undermine the last election and how he is doing it again. She said Trump had to cheat to win, and winning is exactly what our foreign adversaries want. Olivia was followed by Jeff Duncan, a man who literally looked like he was made in a lab for Republican politicians. The man was beautiful, tanned, former governor of Georgia with his Superman hair and a square jaw, and he said, let's get this straight. I am a Republican, but I stand here tonight as an American who cares about the future of this country, and Trump can never, ever step foot in the Oval Office again. Then he spoke directly to the Republicans at home, who were sick and tired of making excuses for Donald Trump. And he said we need to be intellectually honest with ourselves and acknowledge that our party is no longer civil or conservative. It is chaotic, and it is crazy, and it is a cult that worships a thug. And the only thing left to do is to dump Trump. He said, you don't have to agree with everything Harris says. I don't. But you need to recognize the prosecutor mindset, the mindset that knows right from wrong, good from evil, and understands that a steady hand will bring leadership to the White House in the way that Donald Trump never could. And then he echoed what Olivia had said and said voting for Harris doesn't make you a Democrat, it makes you a patriot. We moved on to video footage from January 6th. And despite the fact that I watched that day happen live and followed every day of the January 6th committee, I still find what happened that day absolutely devastating. Honestly, you think I would be numb to it at this point, but the footage of the violence juxtaposed with Donald Trump's voice saying it was a peaceful protest with so much love in the air made me cry again. The video was excellent, and it highlighted what horrors we face as a country when our fellow citizens are fired up on lies and hate. The video ended with Donald Trump saying if he wins, he's going to pardon these people and he expects them to get an apology. And then the screen went black and showed us the list of charges that Donald Trump himself is facing for his part in the January 6th insurrection. And then it cut to the words, if Trump is elected, he will never be held accountable. It was chilling. The video was followed by the chair of the January 6th committee, Congressman Benny Thompson, who said he had dedicated his career to protecting votes because his own father never got to vote because of Jim Crow laws. And what he saw on January 6th was insurrectionists trying to take that right, which had been so hard fought, away. That the whole thing had taken place because one man couldn't handle losing, and he lied about an election, and he led a mob to Washington. He said this man would rather subvert democracy than submit to it, and he is planning to do it again. Congressman Johnson was followed by a retired United States Capitol Police officer who acknowledged the 5 fellow officers who died as a result of that day. The officer was an immigrant from the Dominican Republic who came to this country at 12 and became a sergeant in the U.S. Army before becoming a Capitol Police officer. He said he had seen violence when he served in Iraq, but he had never seen anything like January 6th. He said we were assaulted by a mob summoned by the president. He said he was beaten with a pole attached to an American flag. And then he very powerfully said that Donald Trump had betrayed them. It was a moving moment, and it gave a personal face to those American heroes who faced those violent attackers on January 6th, the same attackers Donald Trump calls patriots and hostages. Following that was adorable Congressman Andy Kim, who is currently running for the Senate to replace the criminal Senator Bob Menendez, who described what the Capitol looked like after everyone left, and how he asked himself on that day how things could have got so bad. That here was this beautiful building he was so proud to work in, just destroyed. There is a very famous picture of Representative Kim on the evening of January 6th, on his hands and knees picking up trash from the Capitol floor. And Kim told the audience that we are all caretakers for this great republic. And in that moment, he was just doing the only thing he could think of, which was to start cleaning it up. Kim reminds us that it doesn't have to be like this. And as a father, he refuses to believe our children are doomed to grow up in a violent, hostile America. That there is a hunger in this country for a new generation of leaders to step up and do the right thing. Then Stevie Wonder came out to perform a song, and before he did, he took the time to address the audience and remind us that this is the moment that we will tell our children where we were and what we did, where we stand between history's pain and tomorrow's promise, and we must choose courage over complacency and kindness over recrimination. That we must rise above our hate and anger and division and keep on keeping on until we truly are the united people of the United States. After that, we stepped into prime time with Mindy Kaling. Mindy spoke about her Indian heritage, about the fact that both her and VP Harris's mother had come to America from India for better lives, and they had found it. One became a doctor trying to cure breast cancer, and the other became a scientist. Mindy talked about meeting Kamala when they had done a cooking video on Indian food to introduce the world to Kamala's Indian heritage. When she mentioned the particular Indian dish they had cooked, there were a bunch of people throughout the audience who cheered because they recognized the food she was talking about. It was a representation matters moment in an authentic story that spoke not only to Kamala's Indian heritage, but also to her ability to connect with people and her authentic goodness that Mindy recognized right away that day in her kitchen. House Minority Leader, and if we do our work, soon-to-be Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, came out and rattled off a list of all the things Democrats will protect if they get the power of Congress back. And honestly, the list was thrilling. He said everything from workers' rights to women's rights to small business to the middle class, free enterprise to ending children's hunger, the Affordable Care Act, voters' rights, veterans' rights, unions. The list went on so long that people were screaming with excitement by the end. He said nothing can stop us because we are on the way up. And he recited the words of the Pledge of Allegiance. And by the end, the audience had joined in. By the time he got to liberty and justice for all, the entire arena was screaming it. We heard from Bill Clinton, which was great, if not a bit long, but Bill Clinton has never been known for brevity. Clinton talked about the pride of being a Democrat and the bravery of the Republicans and independents who have joined them up on the stage. He honored Joe Biden, first as a man who hadn't expected to run again, and then as a president who came in the heart of the pandemic and economic crash and healed the sick and put the rest of us back to work. He praised the president's success at strengthening our alliances for peace and security around the world, including standing up for democracy in Ukraine and his incredible efforts of the administration to undertake peacemaking in the Middle East. Clinton then pivoted to how important and rare it is to have a leader willing to give up political power and how Joe Biden had done it as George Washington had done it. And it was an important part of his legacy. And then he thanked Joe Biden for his courage and his passion and his class. Bill Clinton said, with every election, he asks himself, will this leader take our country backward or forward? Will they give our kids a brighter future or a darker one? Will they bring us together or will they tear us apart? And that those are the questions we have to ask ourselves now. He said that politicians have an important job, that people look to our leaders and we say, here are our problems, solve them. Here are our opportunities, seize them. Here are our fears, ease them. Here are our dreams, help us chase them. And Bill Clinton said he believes that Kamala Harris will help us do just that, while Donald Trump has no desire to do anything but look out for himself. While he's all me, she's all you. Nancy Pelosi came out for a short and sweet speech, and it reminded me what a hero she is to our party and to our country. She really held us together during the last 2 Trump years, saving us over and over from his agenda being accomplished, and honestly keeping us out of many wars and conflicts. She was sanity and competence as Speaker of the House, while the president was an insane moron. Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania and Democratic rising star, made the argument that Democrats are the party of real freedom. And he painted a story of a little girl free to go to a good public school and walk home from school safely and breathe clean air and drink clean water and grow up healthy to marry or not marry and have opportunities, maybe a union job, and make her own decisions about her life and her body and her family and be respected for who she is. He also said that that little girl deserves to look up and see a Madam President, that she knows that everything and anything is possible in America, and that is real freedom. He said that while Kamala and Tim's names might be on the ballot, it's our rights and our freedoms and our future that are on the line. We heard from National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, who you might remember from President Biden's inauguration. And while I can't do justice to her poem, this is a woman with a gift to this nation, and I highly recommend you go and find the video of this moment. A standout line for me was, let us not just dream the American dream, but be worthy of it. The convention was then thrilled with the surprise arrival of Oprah, who reminded us that the election is not about us and them, but you and me, and we need to consider what kind of future we want when we cast our ballot. Now, Oprah is a registered independent who says she has always voted her values, and she called on independents and undecideds to acknowledge that at the end of the day, it is character that matters, both in leadership and life, that decency and respect are on the ballot, and she wrapped it all up by saying, let us choose common sense over nonsense. The run-up to Tim Walz was just speech after speech of Democratic power speakers that drove home the talent of the party. Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, talked about the cargo ship that rammed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge, destroying the bridge and killing 6 construction workers who were working on it at the time. He said the story of America is a story of those 6 men who died. Men who worked while we slept. Men who were born in a different country, but knew that America was big enough for them too. He said that the unevenness of the American journey has made some people skeptical. And he wasn't asking people not to be skeptical, but to make sure our skepticism is a companion rather than a captor. That making America great doesn't mean telling people that they're not. And that loving your country doesn't mean lying about its history to make yourself feel better. We heard from Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, who reminded us that the Trump ticket choosing a man like J.D. Vance to be vice president sent a clear message that the campaign was doubling down. They weren't even trying to balance what Donald Trump is, but they're putting all their chips in on negativity and grievance, that the Trump-Vance campaign could be boiled down to one word: darkness. Darkness is what they're selling. Darkness is what Project 2025 will bring. And then Secretary Pete said, the thing is, I just don't believe America is in the market for darkness. Pete said leaders matter because of what they bring out of us, that the Republican Party is appealing to the very smallest part of people by telling us our greatness comes from the past, that anyone different than you is a threat, that if your neighbor or nephew or daughter disagrees with you politically, that they aren't just wrong, they're your enemy. And then he pivoted to talking about his family, a family that as a gay man with children 25 years ago would have been impossible. He said the idea of a family like mine went from impossible to possible, from possible to real, and then from real to ordinary in less than half a lifetime. But he highlighted the fact that that didn't happen organically. It was brought about by people, brave and persuasive organizers, and yes, politicians. The right kind of politician can move things forward. So we should vote for politicians who are building bridges and not ones that are banning books. Senator Amy Klobuchar came on to give some background on her fellow Minnesotan Tim Walz and to paint the picture of how the Mississippi River starts in her state but travels down through the country. And as she named each state it went through, the delegates of that state stood up and cheered. By the time she was done with the journey of the Mississippi River, everyone was excited and cheering. And she finished by saying, "So let us cross the river of our divides and come together." To introduce Tim Walz, we got another one of his actual neighbors. We met the first one in roll call, but this man was younger and had actually been coached by Tim for 7th grade basketball after Tim took on extra work to help pay a poor child's lunch debts. I'll say the story of Tim Walz just continues to be the story of one of the most genuine, compassionate, trustworthy, look out for your neighbor people you could ever hope to meet. The neighbor was joined on the stage by members of Tim's championship football team, who are all older now and their high school shirts are a little tighter, but there they were cheering their coach at the highlight of his career. Then the neighbor said, "We want people in charge to be genuine and compassionate and trustworthy, that you always hope people like that will run for office." But in this case, his neighbor did. The highlight of the evening was the speech by Tim Walz. And I'm sorry, but it's like you put every amazing quality a man could ever have into a machine and it came out with Tim Walz. It is unreal how amazing this guy is, talking about loving your country and helping your neighbor and fighting for what's right. He said your neighbor doesn't have to look like you or act like you or love like you, that we don't all have to make the same choices to be respected and have worth, that there is a golden rule in Minnesota that we should all stick by, and it's mind your own damn business. He spoke directly to his family, Hope, Gus, and Gwen. And when it cut to them, they were all crying. His son, Gus, was so moved that he stood up and said, "That's my dad. That's my dad." They love him. They believe in him. This man is the real deal. And when he talked about freedom, which led him to guns, as a hunter and a veteran and someone who says, "I'm a better shot than most of the people in Congress, and I have the trophy to prove it," he said he believes in the importance of the Second Amendment, but he's also a dad and a common sense guy. And he's adamant that something needs to be done to protect human life, that our kids deserve the freedom of going to school without worrying about being shot dead in the halls. He said the Republicans are offering us an agenda that nobody asked for, an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and most extreme, and an agenda that does nothing to help our neighbors. He said, "Is it weird?" And people laugh because Republicans acting weird is credited to him. But then he moved on from that. He said, "Is it weird? Absolutely. But it's also wrong and dangerous." Finally, he brought the whole thing back to football. And he explained that we might be down and the other team might be up, but the ball is in our hands and we are the ones on offense. He said it is our job. And he looked up to the rafters and he said, "Our job." And he looked at the audience at home and said, "Our job to make sure we get that ball down the field, to block and tackle and help our team get to the end zone 1 yard at a time, one phone call at a time, one door knock at a time, one $5 donation at a time, that we can win this, but only if we're all working together." I cried throughout this speech. This man is not here for his own ambition. He is not here because he wants to be president. This is not a man who spent his lifetime dreaming of where he would go. This is a man who spent his lifetime helping other people, teaching children, fighting for our country, building a family with his wife, struggling with fertility and getting a beautiful daughter out of that struggle. This is a man who understands the American experience, loves his neighbor as himself, and believes in the American dream. This is a man who will support his president, who doesn't mind standing behind someone or being second to a woman, because this is a man who spent his whole life working with teams, inspiring people to do what's right, even when it wasn't popular and even when no one was watching. America got so lucky with Tim Walz. But I know there are men and women all over America who are out there doing the right thing for the right reason too. And I hope they see themselves reflected in someone like Tim and will work their hearts out to get him and this powerhouse badass president elected in November. Because the good people of America deserve this ticket. We deserve candidates who respect our rights and care about our future and will work for our progress. I couldn't have been more thrilled to have been there at this moment in history, and I can tell you anything we can do to help move this down the field, we have to do. Hope is here. Let's be worthy of it.